I got to change that up a little bit there for you. Um, awesome. Well, hey, I want to thank you both for joining, and again for your patience. So I was hoping, like, just because you both did this event, you bring different perspectives. Like Peter, for your first time, like, OMG, like what happened?
I
Like,
didn't exactly finish, just for the record.
no, yeah, fair, okay, fair enough. I appreciate the candor, but uh, goddamn, you were close, as you know. Um, I think I think rounding counts. Anyway, you ran further than 99.99999% of endurance station will ever run. Um, and then Tim, for you, sort of coming back, like the things you saw for, like what you did differently. I think there's a bunch of different lessons learned. Um, so I kind of wanted to cover some of those today, just so for people out there who are thinking about ultra and to sort of dream about the bigger distance, how big is that gap between, a 100 miler and this, or, from a 50K, like someone's like, I did an ultra, and you're like, ooh, yes, that's like the first 10 hours of day one, like not the same zip code. I'd love to help orient people a little bit around it. So um, how about, can you just start by just kind of describing the event to people who've not been paying attention and kind of need to understand? You can take turns or however you like.
I'll go first. The the 200 distance compared to like 100 is, it's not double, it's not even triple, it's more like quadruple. It's like the difference between a half iron and a full iron. It's not twice as hard, it's 3 or 4 times that, time wise and difficulty. That would be the best way, I think. And I think that's true with all of our events and all of our distances. When you start doubling them, it's not just twice as hard, it's exponentially as hard.
Right. Yeah.
That's the only way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It just gets, I love it. We got to find that for that, like just that curve. I think there's a curve here somewhere in the background that looks just like it. Like, oh, it's harder. Then it's like, oh my God, so hard. Just shoots off the screen. How about you, Peter?
Yeah, it's a really weird thing. It's like 100 miler, it is still in the realm of, it's kind of an effort and then it's done, even though it's, like upwards of 30 hours, where here it's like you don't even think about it in terms of hours. You think about it, in terms of days. That's how you remember it, is like day one versus day two versus day three. It's just it's a different animal. And even 100 miler, you can make mistakes and still fake it to get to the finish. But this is just a different beast.
Yikes. I love the mistakes analogy for sure. And I also like the days. When people think, most of the folks inside the team have done an Ironman. When you think about, oh, I need to get there on Wednesday for my Sunday race. It's like, what if you started racing on Wednesday? You still got to hit the finish line on Sunday, but you started on Wednesday, right? That is this versus what most people do. Oh, that's crazy. That's so crazy. So what is, in terms of like backstory on Cocodona, like what is, like where'd the race come from, and why this particular area? Like what's unique about this space and the race as it stands, like sort of in the ecosystem of ultras?
The race was dreamed up by Jamil Curry, and he basically, it's the name Cocodona is the Coconino Plateau combined with Sedona. That's how he combined came up with the name. And they had originally envisioned it from Black Canyon all the way to Flagstaff, and due to the fires, et cetera, last year, we got a reroute. So remains to be seen what's going to happen next year as far as the route, the course, whether or not they go more back towards year one or year two. But they seem to have a lot of outs and a lot of alternatives. So certainly looks like year three is on.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll just add that part of the allure is it connects all these historic mining towns. So it's he was trying to replicate a bit some, like UTMB, sort of these European races where it's, it's connecting these towns where a lot of people come out to cheer it on and whatnot. But yeah, 200s are a relatively new distance. There's this lady that puts on the destination trail runs. She does Tahoe, Moab, and Bigfoot. And Cocodona is a new entry, and there's a few others springing up. Like there's a new race in Costa Rica now that goes from ocean to ocean, which looks kind of intriguing.
Costa Rica, that's also next level. Like Costa Rica is not a hospitable place to travel through stuff.
Oh, Candace is also talking about Tucson 200.
Right.
And apparently she owns a house, and lots of local people have heard about it. So it remains to be seen, but apparently she's threatening February 2023 in Tucson.
Wow. Like that's in your backwoods practically. Well, not woods.
Yeah.
Yikes. Okay, so all right. So it's an outlier for sure, because we can sort of count on one hand the number of US races that fall into this category. For me, one of the big things that kind of jumps out is you mentioned sort of the scale of the race. For me, it's also the scale of the preparation, like in terms of all the things that you're doing, both physically, but also like strategically. There's just all different sorts of problems that you're solving. So Peter, I know for you, like this was like, I mean, knock on wood, like your longest streak of, I think, healthy training since I met you, which is amazing, right? So
Yeah,
can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what was when you set out to do this, when you signed up and you were like, OMG, I just did this. What were you committing to, like calendar wise, so people understand?
Yeah. So I guess looking back, I'm proud of what I was able to accomplish, even though I didn't quite finish. Just I showed up, to the finish line, with a reasonable chance of show up to the start line with a reasonable chance of finishing. So really the race was May 2nd. I started training in August, after taking almost a year off of doing anything physically active at all. So obviously still had a history of endurance sports, but started basically from scratch. So, built up starting in August, with a number of kind of milestones along the way, a lot of epic training, days, with Tim was there for several of them, and it was a lot of fun, the build up, but it took a lot of gradual build up. I think that's what made me successful. And it's a different type of training too, a lot more hiking and rather than just, running. So I think was able to, I think it takes a little bit less of a toll on you, right, than just pure running on the road.
I want to hear Tim's perspective, but I have some questions about that amount of training and the toll it takes on you. Like, go ahead.
My training. I basically it was a year focus to be totally honest. And actually, if you think about it, it was a 2-year focus, because if you throw in last year's focus, it was all about training for Cocodona. And then after I failed last year, it was all structured from year to year just for Cocodona. So I took a bunch of time to recover, and we drove the motor home to the East Coast and everything. But when I went into like a maintenance mode of just trying to do some running, some hiking, and then I specifically started out in the summertime doing speed work, doing fast and far. So I worked a bunch of speed that I hadn't gotten for a while, and then gradually built. But it was a year of specific looking just at Cocodona as far as my training went. And if you think about it, it was really kind of 2 years. So it was a little bit unlike Peter. It was a very long-term focus for me, my training.
I think that's, we say that for Ironman, right? Like, hey, you sign up for the race, but we don't want you to start training for it because it's such a long way away. And that's like almost the inverse here, that you have to start making those decisions. And like Peter, you said, like kind of building the baseline fitness, in your case, kind of getting started again. Tim, for you, sort of recovering, right? Transitioning, like having that break and then getting back into it. And kind of sounds like your weeks, your weeks are days and your months are weeks, sort of in a gradual transition backwards. How do you, when you think about structuring your training for that, are you structuring it by, because I know, Tim, you talk a lot about sort of elevation, in terms of the work for a race? Are you structuring it by saying, hey, I want to be doing this much time on my feet, whether it's running or hiking for a given time frame, or are you tackling vertical? Like, when we speed work aside, I guess, what is that? How do you begin to chop the race up to do that?
It's I might have sounded like it was really structured, and it kind of was when you look at it in the graphs of the context of the whole year.
Right.
But it was nothing more than saying, okay, I'm 8 weeks out. It's all specific. I went much more hiking, no speed work. And then, 12 weeks out, it was a little more speed, a little more running, so, and then, 16 and 20 weeks out, I was doing like full on speed work, getting ready for a road marathon. So yes, to answer to your question, is there was time on feet and vert and hiking and running are all in the picture every week. And it's just a matter of which one gets done the most, however closer you are. Like, definitely the last 8 weeks was really a lot of vert and a lot of low intensity hiking. Specifically because we were facing that day one, which we didn't have to do. So Peter and I were both focused on a ridiculous day one, which actually got changed because of the fire.
That's the one that you test ran, right?
We test ran it. That's brutal. As a standalone race, that would be really stout. Like as just a 50K on its own, there's not many 50Ks out there that would even give it a run for its money and difficulty.
Wow, that's crazy. That's super crazy. How about for you, Peter? Like, in terms of, Tim, I like how you sort of mentioned you had this variety of things and then they were just reallocated, like you just sort of move the needle up and down depending. How about for you in terms of, obviously, family, structure, work, all of that? How did you organize things?
Well, in terms of overall training, looking back, basically I did an ultra distance every month starting in November. So from November through April, each month I did something that was over a 50K of some kind, whether it was just an actual race or something fun. So those were kind of big boulders. And then I just tried to be as consistent week to week as possible. So I was trying to get as many 60+ mile weeks with 10,000 feet of climbing in. So I had multiple stretches where I did like 4 to 5 weeks back to back with that volume. I think I did 2 blocks like that, a little rest in between. So I think just that consistency is what really helped. And then in terms of how to fit it in, I think this type of training is easier to fit in, at least for me, compared to like an Ironman, having a job and family, and that, a lot of my runs on the weekends, I started at like 4 or 5 a.m. So I was usually done by like 10 or 11 in the morning. So pretty easy to hide this kind of training, in the morning or at night, as opposed to Ironman, especially if you train outside, you want to ride your bike during daylight hours, get into a pool and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, so you're balancing, there's all those logistical changes. But that said, though, for you had to, Tim, you kind of get to, I imagine you go out your back door if you had to. But I know for Peter, you had to go places, right?
I ended up going places for fun, but actually I'm super lucky. I can walk out my front door and get to pretty extreme vertical elevations in 2 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, they're literally, I can see it from my house. There's a hike I can do where in 2 miles, I gain pretty much 2,000 feet.
That's legit. You could do your own little Everest right there.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's so crazy. I do think about those logistics. So part of what you got at, both of you, a little bit there, was like the structure of the training, but also the work that you have to put in these discrete blocks, right? There's certain, like you mentioned, boulders, like, what is the focus for this block versus the focus for that block? And I imagine there's a sort of a general trend of fatigue and so on. Like, along the way, fatigue just shows up anyway, right? The first time you did those long runs, I know you were like, someone just parked a truck on me, like, you get there, but the first time you do it, you're like, oh, that was harder on me than I thought. I'd be curious to know, like, sort of what became, like, what is your go-to strategy for that type of recovery? Like, do you say I need X amount of time, or is there a certain protocol you follow, like nutritionally or um, self-care wise or something like that? And like, how would it differ from what ordinary athletes would do? I would be like, I'll take half a day off. Like, do I need to take 4 days off, or how do you balance that?
That's interesting, and hard to answer, because in the context of when you're coming from Ironman, you're thinking, oh, a 3-hour run is torture. And it is.
Yeah.
But you're running even if you're running in zone 1, you could be at the top, you're probably in the top of zone 1, which is actually pretty fast for most people.
Right.
So, but when you go out and you do a 3 or a 4-hour run hike in the mountains, the drop in intensity really changes everything as far as the recovery is and what's needed. Until I guess you really have to experience it. But then there's a point where you can go low intent, like the race itself. I'm still fatigued. Here we are 4 weeks later, and I'm still sleeping an hour or 2 hours during the day for a nap, and I'm still sleeping eight plus hours at night. I am definitely still fatigued. I feel like I'm just starting to come out of that now. But for a 4-hour run, if it's done at like just hiking intensity, it's amazing how little time you really need to recover from that. Okay. And I don't know. It's hard to say until you actually go out and do some of those type of work. It's like, to me, the Ironman training, going out and doing a 5-hour hard bike ride, that was the workout that I hated the most, because I knew how much intensity was required for me to do it at the pace I wanted to get done. So right. It was like, I dreaded it every single time. It was like a speed workout every time, even though it was only Ironman. But to me, that's how it relates from one to the other.
Okay, interesting. How about you, Peter?
Yeah, I think I had a similar experience. I don't remember ever dreading going out to do any of this. And like you said, any run under like 4 or 5 hours run didn't really dig you in any sort of hole from my experience. Just hiking 18-minute miles, jogging downhill 12-minute miles. Really the only time I ever really did recovery weeks was after sort of those ultra distance runs month over throughout. But even some of those didn't really, it was really like once you go like 8-10 hours, that's where you need like a recovery week. I felt like, but a recovery week was dropping down to 30 miles for that week instead of 60.
That's true. I guess it is all relative, right? Like it's not like you're shutting it all down.
Yeah.
It's just a percentage.
And there was even one week where I went on a Thursday to go visit Gabe and some others. And we did like a 9-hour hike on Thursday, super low effort. And then on the weekend, I just did my normal big runs. So it's all relative, compared to Ironman training, I guess.
Well, okay. I mean, that's super helpful. I know for me, like that fatigue, there's like, we talk about like the acute training load and the chronic, like, so the acute from like a bigger weekend or a week or whatever it is, but the chronic as well. Like I've got to believe that there's some, like you mentioned, Tim, you're still shedding some of that fatigue. Like there's got to be some sort of insidious like creep into your daily routine, even though you're able to, you can keep going. It's not you can't keep going, but your body's like, hey, like I need to eat a ton of calories because I'm burning energy. I'm moving for 9 hours. Like most of you think about it, people like, they just want to hit 10,000 steps. They don't realize is they're still sitting at a desk for like, 30% of their day, and they're sleeping for another 30%. So they're only, like they're not doing that much. I don't know. So like, do you find that like kind of like the sort of like, yeah, I did this long effort over the weekend or last week was big, I need some time to recover? Or is there also like, do you have to take into account the fact that like, hey, by month 3 or month 5, like, I'm like overall I'm functioning I'm Tim, I'm 60% Tim. I'm normally 89 or 90% Tim when I'm training, but I'm just fatigued? Or do you just adapt and it's not an issue?
Not, I could feel those. I like the structure I kind of laid out was I did it based on what was available for races, and I was doing a race or an event like we did the Backbone one weekend at Peter's house. But I was doing a 50 mile. I did a 50 miler, 100K. We did the Backbone, and then I did another big 3-day camp right about the time you guys were out here for the Tucson camp.
Right.
And each one of those was quite the event in itself, and they were only separated by 2 weeks, but I could feel it was cumulative. As time went on, I was becoming more and more tired. Each one wasn't that bad in itself because I wasn't racing and pushing myself 100%. I wanted to make sure that I had recovery, but it definitely after the second or third one, you start to really kind of feel it. So I would start to take extra time in the middle of the week in between those two. But you really only have to pay attention to what your body's saying, and you go, oh my God, I'm tired. Let's ease up a bit and take a couple easy days. Doesn't have to be a whole week, I don't think, but after the event, here I am a month later and still going, geez, I need another week down.
Right. I think just as long as it takes, like any race, like the length, I always think about it from an Ironman perspective, like sort of the length of the race. And then there's another factor, sort of like the length of your training, that I sort of factor into what that looks like for your exit. In this case, with just that such a long build and such a acute block, like the lack of sleep, the constant moving, the toll on your body, and we talked about exponential stuff, but that exponential cost, like the miles on day 5 are so much more costly than the miles on day 1. I could totally see it. I'm surprised, and I can't believe it's. I can't believe even talking about what next year looks like, because you're still like, I'm exiting this year. Like, to me, that's like a big piece. But I guess for the listeners at home, the big takeaway for me right here is that listening to your body. Like, I think when the races are shorter, like, that's just an Olympic or a half, or I'm just doing this marathon. Like, it's just a couple hours, like, I think we lose sight of that.
Like
on that training.
If I was facing another 200 miler this year, I think I'd shoot myself.
Oh no, I am facing another one.
What kind of an idiot would? Oh, so all right, we're gonna get to that. I do want to talk about that. I do want to dive into that a little bit, but let's break it down a bit, because the 200. One of the things that really stuck out to me when we were supporting you guys during the live feed, which I will say, I don't know how the other races do it, but the Cocodona site is amazing, like with the updates and the resources, which is fantastic for us watching at home. But like it really hit home for me, just the scope of what you were doing when you started talking, Tim, about, like, you had this jacket at the end. I was like, I just wanted to take that jacket because you were leaning to one way. I wanted to put it on the other side of you. And then you're like, well, I had that jacket because we were climbing to altitude and I thought it was going to be cold overnight. So I had to bring it with me because I can't give it to my Sherpa. But then I can't give it away. So I have to take it all the way to the finish with me as well. So that just brought so many things to me. Like, first of all was the, like, lack of sleep, temperatures, daytime versus nighttime, and the associated gear you have to have. Like, the logistics are huge. Like, how does that factor into your training? Like, how many times do you, like, need to run at night, or do you practice running on sleep deprivation, or is that just something you kind of get through, or is that through smaller races? What does that look like?
I think you should practice running at night, but not so much because you need to practice it. It's just practicing with your lights and your clothing. Just prepping that. I mean, I'm a morning person, so I like to do my workouts and get all done in the morning, noon the latest, and then be sitting on the couch for the rest of the day. So this concept of, like, they started us at 10 a.m. at this race, which was weird. We all hated that. but yeah, the round the clock thing just happens, and it doesn't really seem that bad at times. Other times it's torture, but I don't think it needs to be practiced that much. Definitely get out there and do things, but it's more or less, I think, just preparing the gear in your mind. But I don't know. That's the way I feel. I don't think you need any more than a few hours of night training.
Okay. Peter, how about like for you, can you answer that gear question as well? Like how, like you've got to carry it.
Well, I made it extra hard on myself in that I didn't have an official crew. So I mean, I had people out there helping me and whatnot, but I was relying 100% on drop bags, and I was carrying a lot more throughout the entire race just because I didn't have a real crew. And I did practice with a lot of the gear and training. Like I would have been screwed if I didn't, because I wanted to use a different light, a newer light than I had used previously. And through trial and error, I realized it was defective. Like it was burning through batteries too fast. It was getting too hot. And had I not really put it through its paces, I would have not been able to make it a full night, given the way it was functioning. So I went with a different light at race day.
Which light was that, Peter?
I was trying to go the Ultra Spire 600.
Okay.
I ended up going with Cocodona on race day. I now have they replaced my light, so I'm going to try the Ultra Spire again, just because I think it'll work out better if it works. But
the light is on. You also just don't like have a burn in like in the front of your.
Well, it's not a headlamp; it's a waist thing. Both of them are more waist mount, which I think is a better option.
I was gonna say, having run at night only a few times, like I would definitely not wear a headlamp ever again. That was awful. It's too distracting, and too bounce around for me for sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about the technical side of things, though, not just the lights, but like also like the material, the fabric, like what you need, etc. Like, there's obviously some key choices you're making so that things can be multi-purpose, right? You're doing layers. You've got to deal with this extreme sun. We can see in the background here. This person's, got the hat on and everything and the poles, but there's times when you don't want those things. Like, I guess, what are your top sort of 3 things like that you're like, oh, these are the like couldn't do a 250 without these things? I mean, aside from obviously like the obvious sneakers or whatever, but what does that look like?
I got most of that, but your microphone seems weak, Coach B.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. My bad. I think I was sitting too far away. Sorry. I was just asking about the gear, right? Like, what is your, like the gear is really important, like the technical side of it. Like in terms of the choices you make, you need multi-purpose garments that can't be too heavy, etc. Like, how do you?
You go first, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a community where we share a lot of ideas, and pretty much everyone uses a Solomon pack at this point. It's those are the best. The lightest fabric. It's stretchy. It's comfortable. The shoulder straps don't tend to cause issues like some other vests do. So pretty much everyone uses those. They have a nice quiver that you can buy. Although it seems like they might be running out of stock, but the quiver, you can put your poles in there. People are now experimenting with umbrellas. That's a way to have some heat protection. Apart from that, you have to have technology to have the entire course for navigation somehow. So whether your phone or a newer watch that can handle it. Poles are very important. And there's a lot of gear. It's a light system of some kind with chargers, so you can keep things charged. Heat management, some way to have stuff that can hold ice that you can have on your body in some way.
Okay. What was that for you?
I use these Nathan things that I got from a suggestion from Gabe. Okay. It's a bandana that has a zipper pocket to put ice in.
Oh.
Orange Mud makes arm coolers that has pockets you can put ice in. I've used that before. Just put it in your hat.
Right. The classic. Okay. How about you, Tim?
talk a little bit about, instead of exactly what I chose, because but how I chose it. And one thing is, I was definitely leaning towards waist belt lights, and I used those on, I think, 2 of the 4 nights. And then I struggled on one night finding the course with the waist belt, and I didn't realize it because my battery was dying. I needed a new battery, and it took me forever to change that battery, which I had on me, but it took me forever. Steve Bohr would remember that because he's the one who changed my battery for me if I'm on. But yeah, I'm on my hands and knees in the desert trying to do this battery with my iPhone out. But in the end, I ended up liking the headset light better, and wore that on the last 2 nights. But I hate all lights, but I happen to like that headlamp best on this course for some reason. After going with the waist belt lights forever. But the biggest thing of basically gear is that's kind of, those choices are still individual. What I did was I had all my favorites, obviously, and they're pretty much the same as what Peter was saying, the Solomon pack and things like that. But I went with a crew, and what we did was, at each aid station, what the things I wanted to know from my crew was, what time of day is it, which seems so simple, how many hours to the next aid station, and then I would plan, and then the weather forecast for that time and place. It's different at, say, Flagstaff at 7,000 feet versus Black Canyon, which is 2,000 feet. It's night and day. So I would basically, that was written all on a card. Time of day, how many hours to the next aid station, and what do I need for that time frame. So if I'm going into high altitude and it's at night, I need cold weather gear, and I need my lights. If it's going to rain, I need rain gear. So that's kind of how my cards were written out and how I structured it with my crew. So not, basically, I tried to travel minimalist in between, or not carry I don't want to carry my umbrella at night, and I didn't want to carry my lights during the day. The problem is, and that this is where Gabe just loads everything and goes like a bat out of hell and forgets about, he doesn't need anybody because he's carrying everything. You never forget. So there's the benefit of that, but the downside is you got to carry it all. So I only made one error, and I caught it. I had walked away from Sedona without proper lights. And I was about a quarter of a mile away, and I called Heather and said, I forgot my lights. And so she came running. I went back, and she came running and met me in the middle, and I got the lights. I had a small backup light, and I had an iPhone light and a battery, but I did not have my night lights. But anyway, rather than talking about each piece of gear, it's how I go about choosing what gear I need for each section. And that was written down on a piece of paper and given to my crew as well.
Awesome. So that's super smart. I could definitely see how, as the days progress, your decision-making capacity totally gone.
Yeah, Peter can talk about that.
Peter,
take us there. For everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to do the same kind of thing. I carried a lot of the important gear the entire time, like cold weather gear. I always had it on me until I lost it.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that happened. That was fine. And in all of my drop bags, I had a cheat sheet, a card I made with everything that should be in there. And I tried to duplicate things that are cheap enough so that each drop bag kind of had the same kind of stuff. So it didn't matter what time of day I got there, like I would be okay. And just kind of take what I need. So that worked fairly well, but yeah, two things. Well, I didn't even know how it happened. I had a bag in my pack that I had the entire time that at some point just went missing. And that bag had pants my beanie, this special adapter so I could use my backup headlight with batteries.
Mm-hmm.
And those three things were pretty important, especially in that bit me later that I lost all that. But yeah, the decision making part, like I didn't actually sleep until night 3, and I don't think I slept more than 2 hours in 4 nights. And I got to a point where I couldn't make decisions anymore
No.
at all.
Like, is this something going back? Is this something that you're like aware of when it's happening to you? And you're like, I'll go left, I'll go right, I'll go left, I'll go right. And after like 2 minutes, you're like, what the hell's wrong with me? Or are you just not even aware?
I have fractured memories of the last stretch where before I dropped, but I think ultimately if I had to pinpoint why I dropped, I think ultimately it just came down to I just couldn't make decisions anymore. And I got to a point of delusion.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
But in terms of like I thought I had hallucinated when I did the AC 100. That wasn't hallucinating. Like I hallucinated for real this time. that was interesting on top of it. So how are you supposed to make a decision when you look at the ground and all the rocks are rats,
Right.
scurrying around? It's just such a weird thing of awareness, yet everything around you seems not real anymore.
Right.
So that was weird. It's just so hard. Like another weird, I don't know if it's a hallucination or not, but when I was going through Sedona,
Mm-hmm.
there was parts where I was 100% convinced I have run this before at some point before this race. Everything was so familiar. I had such vivid memories of being there to the point I got my Strava out mid race because I was so confused. I'm like, I've been here. I'm going through my Strava. Like I can't find any evidence I was ever here, but I don't know if I watched a Cocodona video that highlighted this section and somehow that imprinted false memories in me, or maybe a memory from being a kid because I've been in Sedona, growing up. But that was jarring that I just had this memory, but it wasn't real. So my brain's wires were crossed for sure. Weird stuff was happening.
Eesh. I can't imagine the compound effect because it doesn't matter all the work you do if for whatever reason, like nutritionally, just fatigue, lack of sleep, like whatever, you just when your reality starts changing, what is the best decision, like you said, you know?
And it's just hard to make a decision. Like toward the end, if I had taken an leave, I would have been in much better shape. My brain was kind of telling me I should do that, but it just felt like an impossible task just to go dig through my pockets, try to find it. Like
Right.
it just seemed too hard. I couldn't do it.
Wow. I mean, I could totally see it happening, but at the same time, I can't imagine being in such a space where you're like taking my bag off and putting it down and getting something out of it. Like, no way. There's no way I'm doing that. I'm not moving. How about for you, Tim? Did you, in this time around, your second time around, did you hit some of those demons or was it a different experience for you?
Oh no, I definitely did. But last year I had a crew and a couple pacers, and what happened last year was at one point Heather was I was at the second night sleep station, and Heather had run off to take one of the crew back to the hotel or something like that, and I overslept. And then when I got up, it was like a yard sale in the tent. I'm trying to eat and drink and tape my feet and get going, and it was like that was to me was an aha moment. How much help is actually helpful. And I was like, if I could have just gotten up in that tent and put my shoes on, and Heather could have handed me a coffee and oatmeal, and I could have got going. But I had to pick up everything. I had to make sure I had everything. So this year, the biggest change I made was I wanted my crew and I wanted it at every aid station, and I didn't really care about my pacer. I figure I weighted my crew as to be much more valuable than a pacer. And it was, there was some that it was so overkill. They didn't need to be there, obviously early on day one and day two, but every single aid station was so much nicer with my crew there. They had my chair set up, food, and we had cards. We could communicate with what I needed, all those questions I ran through before. And it just worked a lot better having that. And so I minimized those decisions by doing that. And I still ended up with 2 pacers. I had Gabe for 15 miles and Fernando for the last 65. But it really, that was a key thing for me, having a crew for me at each aid station. So,
yeah.
3 brains instead of 1. You know, ultimately the runner's still responsible. And when I left Sedona without the lights, it was my fault, not theirs, even though we all had a piece of paper that said lights on it. Every one of us missed it. You kind of you go through the checklists, and then after you've done it like 10 times, you start to become a little nonchalant about it, you know, so you need to make sure you don't miss the really important things. But it's probably a good place to have Kevin's advice. Kevin said, there's pretty much nothing you can forget whatever how could I say this? There's nothing you can't live without on the course until the next aid station. Basically, you can forget your light. You just hang around and wait for the next guy to come by, and you just follow him. You can forget some food. You can bum food. You can survive to the next aid station with a lot less than you think you can. So if you do screw up, don't panic. Just make the best of it and move on. You know, that's all you can do. So.
Wow. If slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It feels like that Endurance Nation should make people do like an ultra first. So they kind of solve these logistics. Don't worry about speed or time, but learn how to do the process stuff, right?
Yep.
Don't worry about going fast.
Spend that 2 minutes with that card before you leave that aid station. You know, you're looking at 18 miles and 6 hours with no help. It's like, just spend 2 extra minutes to make sure you have what you need before you leave. That's all. It seems so simple, but it's easy to forget. It's easy to make a bad call.
Totally. I mean, ever since we started doing that for Endurance Nation, I've got checklists everywhere. My kids think it's hysterical, but it's like it's a superpower. Like even just going into a situation where I know I have a list, I have much more confidence because the list is there. Like I know I'm not going in, like I don't have to worry about it. It's taken care of for me, right? I just have to remember to do it, you know? I think those would be great mementos for you as well from the race, you know, like to bring back memories for you later on, just to be like my six checklists, you know, from this race. Like what was on them? I mean, in 20 years, you're going to be like, man, like seriously, it's going to take you back. Anyway, I wonder, you mentioned the part about memory and the hallucination stuff as well. Does that make it hard for you to go back and like process what happened in order to improve? You know, like if things are so wonky, like I think about, just again, to go back to what we all know, sort of an Ironman, even across a 12-hour day, people have different experiences and they have a tough time making sense of it after a little while. What happens at scale like that? Like that, I'm assuming like your brain can only handle so much, so it starts sampling like 1-hour intervals instead of 10-minute intervals or something, and there's probably some large chunks of things you miss. Like how do you manage with that?
I don't know. How's your recall there, Peter?
My recall is great until the last like 12 hours. I definitely have takeaways of things I did wrong that I can improve on. I'm excited to go back next year. Like Tim's offered to crew me next year with Heather. So that's going to be a huge game changer. So I'm excited about nailing this distance, and I have another race later. So yeah, I have tons of takeaways of how I could improve.
Well, give us a little bit. Give us the sample.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so day 1, I didn't manage the heat well. I thought, oh, it's not too hot. It's fine. I can just power through this, which I did. But you know, I should have been taking ice right away. and I wasn't, which probably helped lead me. I wasn't taking in enough electrolytes early. And that got me nauseous. I got nauseous, so that means I didn't eat as much. So not eating, slowed me down. So I gave up a lot of time, just because of things like that. Another thing is pain management. I think that the sad truth with this distance is it's impossible to do it without some sort of pain relief. And I was going by the book with Aleve and taking it every 12 hours, starting maybe day 2. And the problem is I was talking to my friend who's a fireman in the course, and there's something called rebound pain, which is real. If you wait the full 12 hours, by hour 8, you're almost experiencing your pain even worse had you not taken the medicine. So it's better to find ways to keep the pain medicine, in your body the entire time, either by maybe shifting that a little bit forward, do Aleve every 8 hours, or finding ways to kind of alternate between, Aleve and Tylenol. But you got to have a steady drip of that. Otherwise, it's debilitating, to be feeling fine and then to have to keep going back and experiencing, things feeling awful, repeatedly is pretty tough. And you're not sure if you're injured or if this is just how it is. It plays games with you if you're not on top of that, I'd say. So
Okay.
I think it's probably not advised to, do those during a long race, but as long as you're stay on top of hydration and you're careful, I don't see how else you could do this race.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I could see how that would just start to cascade downward, right? As you start
Like definitely, like it started with my knee, then my hamstring, then my ankle. Like definitely I was having all sorts of joint issues throughout that were coming and going, which is weird.
Just like the rats. Right, I imagine. All right. How about for you, Tim?
The recall of the race does definitely get blurry. You remember the beginning and you remember the end, and then everything in the middle starts to become a little blurry, and you don't know whether you start confusing night 2 with 3 or night 3 with 2, and where exactly you were. I also experienced some of that deja vu that Peter was talking about, and I swear to God, I was walking in a circle. It was at night, and I was by myself, and I just kept every log, every tree, everything looked familiar, like I had just gone by it. And it was driving me nuts. And I did what Peter did. I pulled out my map and I was looking at the map on my phone going, have I been here before? And it's like, I couldn't get past that. But yeah, the recall is to, like some aid stations, I can't remember what I ate or drank. Other ones I can remember plain as day. Yeah, I had 3 chickpea sandwiches and 2 glasses of tomato juice.
Those chickpea sandwiches were the best thing on the course.
I couldn't stop eating those.
I was hammering chickpea sandwiches.
Really? That's so funny.
And then other aid stations, you're like, I remember I went through there, but I have no idea what I ate, what I drank, who I spoke to. It's like what I did.
Oh my God. You guys, that's crazy. I can't, like I said, I can't imagine like dealing with those gaps. Like that's just really disconcerting, like in general, like just in a general day. Like, I think an example for people would be you got home from work. You're like, hey, I'm home. And then you're like, I don't remember anything between the time I left my office and the time I got home. Like I did things, I'm here, but I can't really, nothing stands out to me, and when that happens to me, or when I go through something like that, which is like so routine or so similar, but there's this huge gap, like that's, to me, that's not good. Like, why am I not paying attention? So to just have those periods, to know that like now again, Peter, and next year, you're going to be going into a place where you're like, I will not be functioning well for significant portions of this day, but I'm going to solve for that with, your better strategies for your, pain management and pacing, in those early days and so on. But that to me is, I think one of the sort of the hidden difficulties of the ultra scene that people don't know. Like you said, Tim, you don't know until you do it, where you're managing things that you wouldn't know you were getting into. You're in your mind at sign up, you're solving a distance problem or a can I get there and do this event problem, not a what do I do when I'm not really functioning. Like, so for you, Peter, to upgrade to having a crew next year will be a massive delta, right?
Yeah. I mean, I got a lot of help this year though. Like my wife was coming out to aid stations if they were during the day. By day 3, Gabe was coming to some of the aid stations.
Mm-hmm.
Other Gabe and Alex, who I know, Alex paced me for a bit. They were helping out too. So I had a hint of what it's like to have a crew. They were helpful, but they weren't officially, supposed to be doing things. It was just kind of offered as it was happening. So I'm very appreciative of all the help I did get, but I think having a dedicated crew, and I think for me, a pacer, just the last like 50, I need help at the end. Just, I shut down. I think if someone, really was there, to help push me to the end, maybe I could have done it. I just, couldn't get it done by myself.
Okay. That totally makes sense, right? Like I totally get it. I think just like things that it's just because those decisions are so important. Like they don't stand out per se. Like you mentioned, there's small things that go on, like the insurmountable, like the idea of getting the, taking off your backpack and getting stuff seems insurmountable, but it's true. Like you put yourself in a place where it's what you put up with and what is and is not possible is really interesting, right? You're like, I can't take my backpack off. Meanwhile, I've covered 230 miles under my own power, and it's like, but I can't take my backpack off. Like it's so interesting to me how the human body and mind end up being sort of on these two different spectrums of like what is and is not possible in these extreme events, and they cannot be correlated at all. But we sort of, as we fatigue, we divide them into these two different categories of like, no way, or yes, I don't know. Like I'm not the part about ultra for me. And I don't know how other folks feel. Like there's always the distance and the perhaps epic bumper sticker, although I don't imagine either one of you put bumper stickers on your cars for your ultra. Show of hands. No,
I did.
You did. Hey, all right, you got one. Okay.
Got one sticker. I got a Cocodona sticker.
Damn straight, you better put that thing on there. If you know for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that's just for me, it's that internal exploration. Like you just spend so much time inside your own head. That's just it's got to be almost borderline spiritual at some level, right? To be that much time with yourself. Like you're not like surfing Insta, and you're not like texting people or
two things. One is back on the crew and pacing. Like as athletes, back to Ironman, it's all about being fast but efficient, right? Everything we do, let's talk about transitions. How we are about transitions and how fast they can be if you do it smooth and fast. And everything is efficiency. So if you carry less weight, if you take this apex, all that adds up to seconds at the end of the day. And yeah, this 200-mile thing that takes over 4 or 5 days, and there's many people that do it by themselves out of dropbacks. But there's nothing like being able to sit down in a chair and you conserve your energy and your crew runs around and gets your bag, and all those little things add up to more energy in your pocket, in your body, and in your brain that you can use later on. So yeah, there's a discussion on the Cocodona page about they want to have a solo category. It's harder, but it's not that much harder to ruffle through your own bag and get your own stuff. But from my perspective, yeah, I want I want to get into an aid station and sit down and start resting and recovering and thinking. I don't want to be going through my bags and doing all that stuff. So from that perspective, I think that's huge. I think it's efficiency on steroids over the course of 5 days because you had help. It's not just that one time. It's over the course of all those days, and it adds up. And I think that's true with a pacer. The pacer, they're not carrying anything for you. You know, yeah, they're going to help you with your light if you're an idiot like me and you can't get your battery in, and they're going to help you. They're going to help you navigate so you hopefully don't get lost. So there's a lot of thought that they help you with and save you time and energy that way too. And so everybody, whether they want to run one of these or not, you should at least go out and crew one or become part of a crew or a pacer. I mean, you don't have to do much. Anything helps. And it's an education for both sides when you do something like that.
Okay. Wow. It's mind blowing to me. You know, I like the idea that there's similarities, like that's appealing to me, you know, as someone who's sort of at the pointy end of hearing all these stories, but I can't, to your point, I think one of the biggest things for folks who've been listening, like to wrap up here, is you've got a crew. I think, Tim, you told me this early on when we were talking about the ultra stuff, which is you just have to get out there and start being at the race and seeing what people are doing and get an experience for it, spend time in the different terrains and times and observe what's happening. So you kind of get a sense with your athlete that you're crewing for, like, this is what I will soon be on the other side of this conversation, you know, and have to really, I think, kind of brings it home for you, you know. I can't imagine. So beefy. So here, let's talk real fast, Peter, because I'm curious. Like, so what is this next 200 you're doing?
Yeah, so I still have a big rest of the year. In August, I'm doing the Kodiak 100, 100 miler. And then in October, I'm doing the Moab 240. So I got to 230, so 240 doesn't sound much worse. Yeah, so that's, I'll be with Francis. He'll be there.
Okay.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I'll have Kevin said he'll be able to come out to help crew and pace. So
wow,
that'll be really helpful. And on paper, it's an easier course, although I'm not underestimating it.
I think there's a distance after which, yeah. Okay, I'll take your word for it, but I don't ever want to know, you know. I just think about, like, driving 240 miles is an undertaking, right? And if it's a hilly 240 miles, like if I've got to go somewhere like over a mountain, or if I'm just driving across like Kansas, like it's still hard and it's still a long way, and I still have to, I don't know.
Yeah.
Y'all are crazy. So
what I do have to give one shout out to my wife, who on Mother's Day drove me 400 miles home from this thing by herself. Yeah, and a kid did throw up, you know, while we're driving home. So yeah, there was fatigue just from making it home from this.
You're like, we're fine.
No, we had to stop.
Oh man, that's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. Well, I think that's a good way to end it, which is the support network, you know, whether it's for you, Tim, like with Heather, obviously, or just the crew that you had helping out. And, you know, for you, Peter, the crew, you know, the friends and the help that you got along the way, like you certainly weren't alone, although having a crew would be a big difference. I think the one common theme I think we all share with these sports is that you just can't, it's not something you could ever do on your own. Like there's technically only one medal or one sticker, but yeah, it's a huge accomplishment, you know. It takes so much support. Well, I almost want to know what your guys are doing so that I can sort of plan accordingly. I think that more and more of the team is kind of drifting in this direction of like, how do I explore and how do I get epic? Like you saw Carl's question about transitioning, Peter. Like, you know, I'm sure we got to answer that one at the very least. You know, what made you? Have you always been into the running scene, or was it just, you know, Ironman, meh?
Well, I only started doing any of this in 2012 is when I started running. Yeah, got into the triathlon. You know, had a really great Ironman in 2015 Ironman Wisconsin. Did well there. And I think that I had young kids at the time, that was really taking its toll, just the training and whatnot. So I kind of promised my wife I would kind of dial it back a bit after Ironman Wisconsin. And then there's this epic race here, AC 100. It's a 100-miler that I can see from my house, the mountains it goes through. So that really kind of drew me in. Like I had known about that even before triathlon. It's kind of a crazy, it has an allure about it in Southern California. It's been in the newspaper. People kind of know about it. And it seems like a super exclusive thing. So that was just kind of like a bucket list thing that I just wanted to do. So then I just built up to that, doing smaller ultras. And I actually trained for that without doing any running on the weekend. I trained 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and then weekends were clear. That was how I just to dial it back so I had more family time. That's how I got into it. I think it overall is less visible, to the family, this type of training. Although this time I did a lot of weekend training, but in the morning.
Well, there's always that balance for sure. That's super interesting. How about for you, Tim? Like, I know you sort of always seeking the next challenge, but did you always sort of anticipate this, or was there something you're like, one time you just did something and you were like, that's so much better than what I've been doing?
I mean, I suppose I could say I was intrigued by the 100-mile distance, and I thought that would be a natural progression after I did my first 50K and then first 50-miler. I've said this before. My first 50-miler, I trained and raced. I raced it, but I raced it like a Ironman triathlete, and I redlined the thing. I'll probably still never. Well, I beat the time, but I'll never beat the time on that course. But I was so hurt after that. It was at least a month before you could have talked me into looking at another ultra race. I mean, I was hurt. This one seems to feel the same way. Like I'm not going to say I won't ever do another 200 because that's just stupid. But right now, I'm not signing up for any. That's for sure.
No, I don't blame you. Like, I think there's an exit process. Like if you've already signed up, like Peter has, right? You're kind of locked in. You're like, hey, yeah.
Part of what we talked about, the difference between 100 and a 200 is the 100 is you can do that with no sleep. Even if you go the full, some of them are pretty hard and they go into the mid 30s. Even hard rock is 48. So that's starting to become more like a 200. But most 100s it's feasible. You can finish it with no sleep. So to me, that's just a long day. But when you start talking 4 nights, that's not sleep thing. So that's where it goes into a whole different animal, and you start to go, I don't know if I want to do this. And it's more fast packing. Gabe and those guys are getting into fast packing. So again, will I do another 200? Maybe. I certainly won't repeat them. That's for sure. So I don't know. I don't know what the progression is from here. I'm going to do the lead man. That's what I'm busy doing this summer.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. All right. Well, neither one of you are slowing down in any way. That's for sure. But you're just doing your own path. I appreciate that. Well, thanks to both of you for joining. And, I wish you the best of luck this year, like with the rest of your adventures. We have, is Francis racing this weekend or is it next weekend?
It's still a couple weeks out. It's like
seriously.
All right.
Yeah, 2 weeks from tomorrow, I think.
Okay.
No, 2 weeks from today. It starts on a Friday.
Soon.
Yeah, I'll be there
soon. What's that?
I'm going to be there. I'm going up to Tahoe.
Does he know you're going? You should surprise him.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Pacing Gabe, right?
Yeah, I'm helping Gabe out, but I'm sure I'll see Francis on the course.
Okay. Wow. More pictures, please. More pictures. That's awesome. Fantastic. And definitely get some pictures of his checklists. I want to know. I want to see more of these checklists for sure. That strikes me as just a a great artifact, something that like people will find in the years to come and will be like, what the heck was he talking about here?
The
Look how
dude
type
knows-
A I am. I bought a laminating machine so I could laminate those things.
That is so, I would never pick you to be that kind of person. Tim,
Yeah.
you would never eliminate anything. I mean, the environment, like, come on.
the dude, Gabe knows where not only does he have it, but he knows where it is. Like when we did the bone, we were at one of the aid stations, and I'm like, oh shit, I need some lube. I'm like, Gabe, you got some lube? And he's like, here. I'm like, and then I remember one section, Kevin's like, I need a light. I don't have my light. And Gabe's like, here. I mean, like, and it was like seconds. So not only is he carrying all this stuff, he knows where it is. And like, I don't know about you, Peter, but I'm a freaking yard sale. I couldn't tell you where, I got shit in bags and pockets, and it becomes an event to figure out where something is in my pack. And Gabe is like, he's got some type of organization. I don't know how he does it. I got the same pack as him, but I can't find shit.
Yeah, I have that problem too.
Oh man, that's awesome. But you talk about that efficiency, right? Like that's a huge part of it, I'm sure, for him, right? To just be
very huge, very huge. And he does that while he's moving. He's like, it's like, if you ask him for Advil, he'll pull it out and give it to you. If you ask him for it's like, if you ask me for some Advil, I'm like, I think it's here. We'll start there.
Be like, ask that guy. He knows where it is. Ask me. He's like the tour guide. I'll get you. Awesome. Well, this is super fun. Like, great to just sort of debrief and to hear some of those lessons learned. And for those of you on the team who are paying attention, if you do want to dive more deeply, you sort of can reach out to these two in the chat and see, capture some lessons learned, or maybe they'll help you pick that all important first race as an appropriate first step or entry into the world of ultra, as it were. So, all right, gentlemen, you guys have a fantastic weekend. And please send along any pictures you have, or anything else that you'd like me to sort of share out with the team that you haven't, that people may not know or anything like that. That'd be great. Okay.
Sounds good.
Hey, Coach.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. Take care. We'll see you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Peter.